Thank you and welcome to today's SSP Early Career Subcommittee webinar, Falling into a Scholarly Publishing Career. We are very pleased that you can join us today. My name is Jessica Loiza and I'm a member of the SSP Early Career Subcommittee and the SSP Education Committee. On behalf of SSP, I would like to thank our webinar sponsor, Jack Farrell & Associates. I also have just a few housekeeping items to review before we get started. Your phone will be muted automatically in consideration of our presenters and your fellow webinar participants. This 1-hour session will be recorded and posted on the SSP website 60 days following today's broadcast. If you have questions for the panelists or experience technical issues during the webinar, please use the question box to the right of your screen. Questions will be compiled for the presenters at the end of the webinar. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Jennifer Landsberg. Jennifer is the product manager of the Sell.com web platform at Sell Press and brings a user-focused, data-driven approach to her work. She started her publishing career at Pearson as a proofreader and marketing assistant. Jennifer came to Sell Press 8 years ago as a copy editor in the production department and moved up through production to manage the journal Neuron, and then moved to product management a year ago. And now I'll pass it on to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jessica, and good morning, everyone. We have a great slate of lightning presentations for you today, featuring speakers from a variety of backgrounds and experience across the scholarly publishing landscape, from editorial to marketing, from large publishers to libraries. Each presentation will be limited to a swift 4 minutes. I will be monitoring the questions throughout the webinar for a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. Please indicate whether your question is for the whole panel or for a particular speaker. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Barbara M. Ford, President, Myers Consulting Services.
Hello, everyone. I'm so very pleased to be here. I had the good fortune to work with a very special group of forward-thinking colleagues to make our dream of a society for our community a reality. Now, after 4 decades, I am so proud and impressed by how SSP has developed such a strong infrastructure. It has evolved into a place where professionals in all areas of scholarly communications can be each other's mentors, champions, colleagues, and professional friends in facing both challenges and opportunities. Personally, I've had a patchwork quilt of a career, starting out as an editorial assistant with the National Rehabilitation Association. That's the good NRA. My path wove through both commercial and nonprofit organizations, such as the American Chemical Society and the Chamber of Commerce of the U.S., where I was involved in R&D and market research, respectively. At various times, I was with consulting firms, the last of which was RGA Consulting Group, where I was charged with establishing their publishing services division. It was that business plan which served as the springboard for my starting Myers Consulting Services. Over the years, I have worked as an assistant editor, associate editor, and news service director. As a consultant, I have provided on-site management and expert advice to well over 100 clients, with the great fortune of working with some of the best professionals in our industry, and through society memberships, some of the best minds in the world. I once thanked Dr. Selden Tarrant, a forever friend and mentor, for his support, saying I was so grateful to have been in the right place at the right time in order to work with him at the ACS and develop the first user studies program in society publishing. His response was that many people are in the right place at the right time, but you need to know you're there and how to make the most of the opportunity. So that is my first bit of advice today. Be aware of an opportunity often right in front of you and be prepared to make the most of it. Of course, you've heard that before, but you really need to be willing to push against your walls and don't be timid in reaching for that promotion, that new project lead, that open position either in your current organization or another. Had I been timid, I would have missed out on several key events in my life, in addition to being at the historical turning points of us moving from hot metal to cold type. I grew through such experiences as being coordinator of the first White House Conference on Youth and Technology, being a member of the ACS team developing and assessing the first full-text database in the sciences, which led to chemistry journals online, being a member of an early cohort in the GWU Master's Program in Science, Technology, and Public Policy, and becoming part of the adjunct faculty in GW's Master's in Publishing program, to name a few. Not recognizing that you are in the right place at the right time might result in you missing out on the best times of your career. The second bit of advice is knowing when it's your time to move from the safety of an organization. Many publishing professionals reach a position high enough on the org chart that an acquisition, merger, or collapse can make a position disappear. What do you do then? Your options are: 1, retire if age appropriate; 2, remember that looking for a new job will be your current job; or 3, become a consultant. Now, I don't suggest that last one lightly, and I advise you to not wait until such a decision is on top of you to consider which would be your best option. If you're interested in checking out other places I've been in my career, please visit my LinkedIn profile and send me an invite to connect. We'll talk about the future and the opportunities it may hold for you. Good luck.
Thank you, Barbara. Next up, we have Shirley Decker-Luque from the Content Director of SSRN.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, this is Shirley Decker-Luque, and I'm so pleased to be part of this panel. We all spend so much of our time and energy at work, and I think it makes good sense to give ourselves a minute to pause and think about how we want to navigate our careers. For me, I started in a sort of traditional way within book publishing. My first role was as an associate editor, where I copy edited and did proofreading, and then I sort of worked my way up in a traditional sort of way up the ladder, becoming an acquisitions editor, and then later on a publisher, and finally a publishing director. And in all of these roles, I spent a lot of time thinking about the content, the researcher behind the content, and how to help that person get across their message in the best way, how to communicate to others. But once I was done, or my team was done with our job of signing up the author and helping him to articulate his research, we sort of just handed the content off to the delivery, whether it was a book publishing, print, or in my case, Science Direct as a platform. So about 2 years ago, I did a pivot from that kind of content-focused role to a new role where I'm now thinking more about that delivery platform, thinking about the way that the content, I still, very closely connected to caring for the researcher and the research, but also thinking more about how is it delivered to the people who consume it? How do we present it in a way that helps someone who's coming with questions that need to be answered, problems that need to be solved? How do we present that and deliver it in a way that helps those people? And so now I work on a new platform where we host open content to be posted and to be consumed. In my current role, a lot of what I do is take this platform and expand it to make it more useful to more people. It started in the social sciences, and now I've extended it onto pretty much every discipline under the sun. And I also spend a lot of time thinking about, content. I'm using that word specifically. What are the different types of research output that could be shared with people? And it might be a paper, but it might also be a data set or a PowerPoint slide that's presented at a conference, for instance. I think some of the most exciting parts of my job, have to do with the fact that scholarly communication is really, as you all know, I'm sure, in a big time of transition. And when we ask ourselves, what would the future of scholarly communication look like? There's a lot of, hard work that has to be done before we could articulate a coherent answer. So a lot of what I do now is run experiments and pilots where we're trying to think, researchers have a legitimate request for more transparency. more open access to science and research. And so I spent a lot of time running experiments where we explore, like, what would we do? How could we deliver that? And in this, I'm also leading teams that can just accomplish some amazing new things because we're trying new things. One example is we found out that a lot of journal publishers were really thinking about preprints and interested in doing preprints, but didn't necessarily have the wherewithal to launch a preprint server of their own. And so at SSRN, we now host something, we call it a first look. That's a place where those journals can come and use our platform to have their own preprint space. And that's just something you look back on, and I'm really excited to see that we've been able to do that. Not surprisingly, some of my biggest challenges are actually related to some of the things that are the most exciting. In previous roles as publishing director, a lot of what I needed to accomplish was help my team, the people who reported into me, to do their jobs. And in this new role, and I think this is typical of platform and technology, a lot of what I'm trying to accomplish can only be done if I'm able to pull teams from multiple groups, even different businesses outside of Elsevier, and then definitely different teams within Elsevier. And that can be exciting, but it can also create, particular challenges, as you can imagine. And it's also very difficult to choose what to do and what not to do. Again, there's so many interesting questions, so many cool things that our platform could do. It's hard to pick what to do and what not to do. So for me, I've had both a linear progression within content publishing as well as a pivot to a content delivery platform. And I've been really happy that in all the roles in my career, I've been able to build on my experiences and strengths, but also find new challenges and opportunities to grow. Thanks.
Thank you, Shirley. Our next speaker is Michael DiNatale, Director of Technology and Operations at BioOne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike. I'm the Director of Technology and Operations at BioOne. And what I was hoping to do today was I just wanted to share a little bit about my story and career path and maybe offer for some of you a reassuring perspective about stumbling into a career without really having set out to do so. The title of this session is Falling into Scholarly Publishing. And personally, I relate to that a lot. I feel like I've, over the last almost 10 years now, talked to a lot of people in this profession that have talked about it as sort of being an accidental profession. I don't know many people who've set out or grew up being a kid that was thinking, I'm going to be a publisher or be a scholarly publishing professional. People usually have different goals or different ideas of what a career is. I honestly didn't know much about this industry before I came across it. So my personal background that sort of led to me where I am now, I graduated from college with a degree in journalism and history. I transferred out of a computer engineering program my junior year. Middle of the night, decided I hated circuit theory and analysis and chose journalism, which was a lot of fun and very meaningful to me, but maybe not the most lucrative option I could have selected. So after college, I worked as a weekly newspaper reporter for about 5 years. And eventually I realized that I loved what I did, but paying rent was also important. And the newspapers really weren't going anywhere for me, at least where I was. And so I started looking around and basically applied for any job I could find or any opening or listing. And that's where this sort of accidental profession comes in, because I got picked up having posted my resume on monster.com, which is ridiculous. I don't know anyone who's ever just posted a resume and gotten a job opportunity out of it. But someone at Aries Systems, who makes up to a manager, had found me and brought me in. I think they liked my background, had some technology experience, and that I had some communication skills. But this really sort of opened up me to the industry. And from there, entry-level job is support that led to some wider involvement in the industry. And I think I sort of pushed myself and made myself open to trying and things outside the description of my job. And they started allowing me to attend things like SSP. And getting involved in SSP has definitely led me to where I am today at BioOne, in the sense that the person that approached me eventually about joining BioOne for a project technology project manager position with somebody I met at a SSP local event in Boston. And that person remembered me from a discussion. We connected on LinkedIn, which I think maintaining a presence online like that is super important if you want to stay in touch with people. But that person followed up with people in SSP that I had worked with on committees as a volunteer, who gave, thankfully, glowing recommendations of my work and my attitude. And I think that SSP as an organization really gave me a chance to stretch out into different areas of the industry and make those connections, which obviously paid off in that they positively recommended me for a position. And then I arranged a meeting at a SSP annual meeting in Boston, and the interview went well, and I ended up where I am today. And so I just want to stress how saying yes to volunteering opportunities in the industry can help you grow as an individual, but also maybe open up doors to you that wouldn't quite be there otherwise. And I think that's about it for time. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Michael. Our next speaker is Todd Green, Executive Editor at Wiley.
Hi, everyone. I am really glad to be here this morning, glad to talk to you about my own background in history. And like Michael, the name of this was very apt, falling into, because I did not set out to become a scholarly publisher. I think of my career path as very much coming full circle. I graduated with a liberal arts degree, with a major in creative writing and communication, and thought I wanted to get into something that involved the writing side of that. Answered an ad back when there were ads in newspapers for a small publisher in the technology publishing space, and learned a lot there about different aspects of the publishing world from the perspective of a startup that was figuring it all out themselves. That was a very exciting time to figure out different aspects from marketing to sales, and then gradually became an acquisitions editor. And I was interested to hear Barbara's comment about knowing when to move, and I've made the tough decision to change roles several times in my publishing career. I've heard from people who believe that once you get into publishing, you tend to change roles several times and work at least 3 publishers, and I'm now on 8. If you count Pearson twice when they acquired another company. But each time I've moved around has brought interesting challenges and new topics and new areas. There's not a typo here. When I wrote down my biggest challenges and most exciting aspects, they are very much interconnected, and learning new topics and subjects, first off and foremost, has been something that has both challenged and energized me. Most of my publishing career, I've been in technology publishing, but even in technology publishing, that involved me learning half a dozen different topics at different times across the computer science spectrum, for which I really did not have a background, only an enthusiasm and casual interest coming out of my university days. So I learned different topics ranging from programming to networking to databases to data mining to security as I progressed through my career, and each time got to learn about a new community and learn about a different group of people. And going on to the second challenge / exciting thing is helping them turn their ideas into marketable books. And I say books, there's a lot out there that is content and a lot there that is online. When I meet authors, they are thinking about books, and most of the time, and the common denominator in my world has often been the book, even if we take that content from the book and then do other interesting and exciting things with it. But I find authors, when I start a conversation with them, often are very deep in the weeds. They have had a great idea. They're very excited about their great idea, and they can sometimes start in chapter 10 when really what I want to hear is the back cover copy so that I can start explaining it to our marketing and sales colleagues. So it's a challenge of navigating that, and then also exciting to ensure that the idea really has value. And the final point of putting myself out there, it's super important and not always natural for me to walk up and just start chatting with somebody and trying to find out what their idea is. But a colleague I used to work with once said that people who seem to get a lot of ideas and new authors, it's not luck, it's being in the game. And once you're out there, people start to get to know you, and then they are interested in talking to you about their ideas, which has been very exciting as well. And that was my 4 minutes, which seemed to go by very quickly, but thanks so much. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Todd. Our next presenter is Aileen Irons, Associate Marketing Manager of Wiley.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm just going to talk about my career path as well. So I actually started working in production with another publisher in Oxford, but in educational publishing. After working in that area for a few years and moving companies a few times, I kind of found myself reassessing what it was I wanted from a career in publishing. Having worked with marketers while being in production, I was really intrigued by that side of the industry. And it was my friend who I met during my master's degree in publishing studies at the University of Stirling who recommended that I apply for her old marketing coordinator position. I decided to apply and happily I was offered the job. So I really think not obviously connected. The skills I've learned working in production helped me get the job and it helped me through my marketing career so far. Production requires above all else fantastic attention to detail. You need to be a good communicator, you develop negotiation skills, you need technical knowledge and being able to work to strict deadlines. And these skills really helped me when I first started at Wiley and I was learning about journals marketing and scholarly publishing. So I started as a marketing coordinator for academic journals in what was known as the life sciences team. And here I worked with a large team of marketers who all had diverse journal portfolios. And after a few months, the journal's marketing team was changed around and I was given my own small portfolio of journals while continuing my coordinator duties. And it was after this that I started to experiment with how we could use paid social media to further our journal aims and achieve their goals. And what really interested me about paid social is how we could use data to reach our audiences. And it offers so much flexibility no matter what your campaign goals are. It helps you increase your reach and campaigns can be made to fit most budgets, which is helpful when your budgets are small. And it was around the end of last year, I was asked if I'd be interested in a role where I'd be managing more of our subject-focused social media accounts, as well as centrally managing paid social media campaigns. This role was a new one to the company in a newly created team, and the opportunity was so exciting and too interesting to pass up, so I said yes. The team was and is headed by someone I admired and wanted to work with at some point in my Wiley career, so that was another huge incentive for saying yes. This team, called Partner Enablement, the remit is to create and manage programs that drive engagement with our partners, leverage best practices, develop and monitor the best metrics for assessing these programs. So as I mentioned, my role focuses setting up on and running paid social media campaigns, assessing the campaigns to provide best practices and suggest improvements for the future. So at the start, the biggest challenge being part of a new team was figuring out the foundations for how we're going to set up processes for campaign requests for marketers, how to manage all the campaigns and assessment criteria. And there's definitely been lots of continuous improvement throughout the team's existence as we spot ways to improve how we operate. I've loved the opportunity to become an expert within my company and my team in paid social media. And I've loved working with marketers to develop campaigns for their journals and to test out new ideas. And it's been so fantastic to be encouraged to try new campaigns, try ideas, even if they haven't worked as hoped. It's still valued as useful knowledge to have and to use that to make a new idea work. And this idea of creative risk is something I really enjoy about my job and working at Wiley. And it's just that freedom to be innovative. Another part of my job that has surprised me is how much I enjoy diving into the analytics of campaigns to make sure that our social media success is reflected in our business goals. And what I think also really helps is being part of a very collaborative team with a manager who enables us to effectively do our jobs and be successful. And this year I've also been part of the SSP mentorship scheme, which has been such an amazing opportunity, and I highly recommend applying if you are early in your career. And that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Aileen. Our next speaker is Marisa LaFleur, Acquisitions Editor at Elsevier.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this and giving me the opportunity to speak about my career. I attended Emerson College in Boston because it was one of the only colleges I knew of that had a dedicated publishing program. So my trajectory has been very traditional, interested in publishing from the beginning. So when I started at Emerson, I assumed I'd be working in trade publishing, you know, maybe editing the next Harry Potter book, huddled over a manuscript with a red pen, being best friends with all the biggest authors in the industry. But I quickly learned at college that trade publishing really isn't even like that anymore. And also the Boston publishing community is largely academic. And I knew I didn't want to move to New York City. So ultimately, once I graduated, I decided to stay in Boston and pursue a career in academic publishing. So, like I said, I've had a fairly traditional trajectory. I had 2 editorial internships in college. I started as an editorial assistant at a textbook publisher here in the Boston area called Jones and Bartlett Learning. And while I was there, I was able to have the opportunity to be the assistant for a really exciting platform that went beyond books to help medical students study for their licensing exams. And through that role, I learned a lot about workflow organization, product development, and that all led directly to my interest in my role here at Elsevier and what I've pursued here. So one thing I really like about Elsevier is how forward-thinking the business is. We're always iterating and looking for ways to provide content to our users in the ways that they're using it now and the ways that they need it. So when I started here at Elsevier almost 7 years ago, I was hired as an editorial project manager, actually by Shirley, who you heard from earlier. And when I was hired, part of my job responsibilities were to lead the development of some experimental projects we were working on, developing enhanced ebooks, where we were adding interactive features to some of our textbooks. And so I worked on that for a while, in addition to my other job responsibilities of managing projects through development. And while the business didn't ultimately move forward with those types of projects, it further increased my interest in not only editorial, but also innovating and developing new types of products. And that's been a common thread throughout my career here. And I feel really lucky that I've had the opportunity to work both in editorial and work on different initiatives and projects that help me to learn more about that and advance my career in that way. So additionally, as a project manager, I also was able to help out my team with signing new authors and new projects. So that led to my interest and success in becoming an acquisitions editor, which I've been for 4 years. And as an acquisitions editor, I get to meet professionals in the field. I work specifically in earth and environmental science, and I still can't believe it when I get to go to, for example, a space and planetary conference and watch the Apollo 11 documentary with NASA employees. I sometimes have to pinch myself that that's really my life, so it's really exciting in that way. Like I said, I'm excited to be using technology and shape the future of publishing, which is something that's always changing. And also, Elsevier is such a global business that I'm able to make connections with people throughout the world. Excuse me. Some of my team is in Europe, and I talk to them every day. And so that's been a really exciting and eye-opening experience for me as well. And in addition to that, I've always been encouraged to explore other initiatives I'm interested in. So I've learned that it's really important to communicate your interests and volunteer for groups that can help you learn more about different aspects of publishing you may be interested in. Don't worry about doing what's traditional or sort of staying in your lane, because publishing is a really collaborative environment, and there's a lot of opportunity to learn a lot of different things. So a big challenge, of course, is how quickly the business is always changing. We're changing our priorities all the time. We're trying new approaches while still needing to meet our goals and build our portfolios, but that's also what makes it exciting. So I've really enjoyed my experience in publishing so far. I hope that helps everyone, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Marisa. Our next presenter is Laura Ritchie. She's a consultant with Clark & Esposito.
Hi, everyone. Really glad to be here today. And I've really enjoyed hearing from the other panelists as well. My name is Laura Ricci, and I'm a consultant at Clark & Esposito. And in my current role, I work on different projects with nonprofits, associations, societies, libraries, and many other clients to provide strategic help and direction on issues related to their scholarly publishing programs. And if that seems really general, it's because on a day-to-day basis, I could be doing a million different things. Sometimes I'm putting together spreadsheets for a feasibility study about a new open access journal a client's thinking of launching. Other days I'm working with a client to organize an RFP process to find a new publishing services partner, or maybe I'm conducting interviews, speaking with librarians, members, trying to get some on-the-ground insight about an issue a client's facing. And all of that variety is both the biggest challenge in the role and also the best part about it. And being a consultant, I've found the skills I need to get through the tough stuff are those I would recommend to anyone. I need to be able to communicate a lot of detail, but you also have to avoid analysis paralysis. So even though it's a consultant's job to ask a lot of questions, you have to know when it's time to make a decision and what information is going to be most relevant to that. And that isn't easy. As a consultant, you also can't be afraid of a good challenge. The problems you're called to solve are hard. And our role is to be a neutral person who's there to help the client make a good and sometimes difficult decision. But the process is definitely worth it. The biggest aptitude I see as being helpful to me as a consultant and really helpful to anyone in the industry is to have an inquisitive streak. It's actually, I think, a lot of fun to learn new things about the big trends in the industry and how they're playing out from organization to organization. And the people in the industry are my absolute favorite part. Scholarly publishing in general, I think I would agree with another presenter who said it's a very collaborative culture, and I'm really glad to be in a role where, as I like to say, I get to talk to smart people about what they do all day. And that has so far been the best part about my career. And how did I get here? Well, it wasn't exactly by design. I started my career in textbook publishing, and after a few years of working with Pearson in their custom textbook division, which was the fastest growing segment, I was sent on a talent exchange to New Delhi, India, because they were trying to develop a similar model. And I actually wrote a business plan to apply for the program, and then I remember sitting in my first meetings with colleagues there and realizing I'd have to rethink almost everything because everything was so different. Local price pressures, the way students bought textbooks, and I realized publishing meant a lot of different things around the world. So I then went back overseas to get a master's in international publishing from Oxford Brookes in the UK. And as part of my master's, I had a little bit of experience with a local consultant, and I read a lot of research by Outsell, a firm focused on publishing. So when I graduated, I applied to one of Outsell's open jobs. And I didn't get it, but they did like me enough to hire me on as their first market analyst, and that's where my consulting career began. After a few years of that, I wanted to get my hands dirty again, so I went back into the industry to work at EBSCO eBooks, but I wanted to keep in touch with people outside my company, so I kept volunteering with SSP and eventually co-chaired a committee and got elected to the board of directors. And when EBSCO went through a shakeup and it was time for me to switch careers again, those connections I made at SSP helped to put me in touch with my current firm. And the rest is history. So I think if there is a thread that ties all of this together, it's that being interested in what's going on elsewhere in the industry and sharing that energy with your colleagues can lead to some really exciting places. And my other piece of advice I would give is to bet on yourself. It can be really intimidating, but you don't know what kind of opportunities you can get if you don't apply for them. And that is all of my time. I do love to talk shop with other people, and hopefully I've inspired a few other aspiring consultants out there.
Thank you, Laura. Our next speaker is Stephanie Savage. She's a scholarly communications and copyright services librarian at the University of British Columbia.
Hi there. As said, my name is Stephanie, and I am a scholarly communications and copyright service librarian. That's a bit of a mouthful. I work at the University of British Columbia, which is in Vancouver, Canada. I've been there for 2 years, and prior to being at UBC, I worked in a similar role at the University of Winnipeg for a year, and that's sort of my entire professional career thus far. Just for people who aren't familiar sort of what the job looks like, scholarly communications librarians provide expertise, education, and outreach around publishing topics. Examples of this work include leading conversations on campus around open access, such as the best ways to implement it, both within the library and in the larger academic community. We educate faculty about scholarly metrics, funder requirements, researcher IDs, etc. I also do a lot of project work. A recent example includes working on a grant-funded project to help student journals on campus improve the quality and discoverability of their publications. I also manage and administer our campus installation of open journal systems. As the title of this webinar would suggest, I certainly think I fell into this career. So I have a master's of library studies, which is sort of the default degree you need to be a librarian. I went into that degree thinking that I would do English liaison librarianship, which is what I think most people walk into the degree thinking that they're going to do. But I quickly realized that basically everyone else in the program had a similar idea and that I should be maybe more strategic about my approach to the profession. After an interesting talk from the current copyright and ScholComm librarian, I noted that this seemed like an emerging area and to keep an eye out for it. So later, an opportunity while I was in the program came up to work as a student librarian in that unit, and I took that position. So I worked in that unit as a student for over a year, and I learned a lot about the landscape of academic publishing and walked away from that experience with a firm grasp on the issues that universities were facing. This experience, I think, was enough to land me my first professional position, and I have since secured a tenure track position, something that a lot of my student colleagues have yet to do just because of the nature of the job situations. While I may have initially taken an interest in sort of publishing for practical reasons, I find a lot of satisfaction in the work that I do, and it feels, as others have said on this panel, like an important time to be involved in scholarly publishing. I enjoy the fact that things are in flux and that there is no clear path towards transformation. New publishing models are emerging quickly, and there is lively debate among stakeholders about the best ways to proceed. Another thing that is great about the job is that I believe sort of in the idea of transformative scholarly publishing. I see a real benefit to making scholarly outputs freely available, and I'm sort of buoyed up by the fact that even though progress may be slow, I am advocating for a more equitable publishing system. From a practical perspective, my job also provides me with the opportunity to work across the campus and also across Canada, really. Because my role is functional and not disciplinary, I have had opportunities to work with a large cross-section of our campus community. As a result, I consider myself a relationship builder and collaborator, which is something that I am proud of. While my role is sort of unique and motivating, it is not without challenges. Perhaps the biggest I face is general resistance to change. While it is my job to know about and care about publishing, I realize that the people around me have other responsibilities and focuses. Ambivalence and deference to the status quo can make it difficult to affect change, and this can be discouraging. Working at UBC specifically, which is such a large institution, can make it difficult to know what the proper role of the library is in advocating for change and implementing new policies that may not have broad acceptance among the faculty. For example, should the library continue to subscribe to journal content, even as we see this model becoming unsustainable, or should we start transitioning our collections budgets towards supporting open access initiatives? Finally, as you may have noticed, I've also included a lack of consensus around publishing models as a challenge. It's both, I think, a challenge and an opportunity. While I do think it's exciting to be involved in this work during what is a transformative time, it is also challenging to know what to advocate for when so much is in flux, and every approach to publishing has its drawbacks. Even the idea of open access itself has come under scrutiny, as much of the inequality and cultural imperialism that it was supposed to address has been replicated within it. So to conclude, I would say that although my career path has largely been a happy accident, it has been a rewarding journey, and I am confident that the skill set I have acquired in my professional roles will continue to serve me regardless of where I end up in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Our final speaker today is Randy Townsend. He's a senior program manager at AGU.
Hi, everybody. I'm Randy Townsend, and I've been at AGU for about 13 and a half years right now. I'm senior program manager, but I actually thought that I was going to be a banker. I had no idea I was going to be in scholarly publishing, so the title of this really fits me perfectly. I spent 6 years in banking, and when I realized that wasn't really what I wanted to do, I spent a couple of years as an entrepreneur. I had my own business, but after a few years doing that, I realized that I really wanted to go and learn a little bit more. So I went and got an undergraduate degree in journalism, and then moved from New Jersey to Washington, D.C. And I realized really quickly that an undergraduate degree by itself in DC is not as prominent as I had anticipated. So I went to a temp agency to find a job, and they actually brought me to AGU. And it was actually like a match made in heaven. I kind of fell in love when they started showing me XML. I started off as a production coordinator. So I'd never seen XML or that kind of coding. So the fact that this was all completely new really excited me. I had so much to learn, and I want to learn as much as possible. So within a month or two, AGU extended an offer. So I went from a temp to a full-time production coordinator. I did that for a few years. And while riding the Metro on my commute, I was reading the Express newspaper, which unfortunately is now just went under. They just did their last issue, I think, last month. But reading the Express newspaper, I came across an advertisement for a publishing program, master's in publishing program at GW in Washington, D.C. So I said, you know, this must be meant for me to read because it's talking to me specifically. So I went to an interest meeting. Once again, they were talking all the things I love to talk about and wanted to hear more about. So I entered that program and then received, I'm not sure what cohort I was in, but I received my master's in publishing from GW, and I've met a lot of great people, mentors who didn't really know they were going to be my mentors, but just became my mentors. I have a lot of mentors like that. I like to ask questions because you never know where your career is going to go or who you're going to meet or who can help you out along the way. So Barbara Myers-Ford, who spoke earlier, was definitely one of my mentors and gave me a lot of good guidance and feedback throughout my career. But in that program at GW, they had an ethics course, which once again, I was really interested. I wanted to know all about it. And at that same time, AGU was revamping their ethics policy. So it was a natural fit that I'm learning ethics here at GW, and I get to apply it firsthand at AGU. And we were working on updating a policy from 2001. This was about 2009, I think. And we were updating it based on falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. So I was as I think one of the early panelists said, it might have been Barbara, you're at the right place at the right time. I was really there at the right place at the right time, having the right conversations with the right people. And eventually we revisited the ethics policy because where we were protecting the science initially, AGU is the largest earth and space science organization in the world, and the policy was really meant to protect and defend the integrity of the science. We realized that it was important for us to also protect the scientist and the researcher in some of the difficult situations that they find themselves in. So a few years ago, we amended our policy to include harassment, discrimination, and bullying. I've really been at the forefront of those efforts just by being in the role at AGU. I've also been really involved in efforts related to fair data and preprint servers. So it's really an exciting opportunity to just be in a good space. One of my favorite aspects of my job, I get to build and lead really dynamic and exciting teams. AGU has 22 journals, that's 22 editors in chiefs, each with their own editorial board. So it's really global conversations I'm having with some of the greatest minds in earth and space science. I really like I like how someone just said their job became a happy accident. I guess you can say I kind of stumbled into the right places. I think that's pretty much what I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Randy. And now we are moving into our question and answer portion. Again, if you have a question that you would like to ask of your panelists, please feel free to enter into the question section on the right-hand side of your screen. To start things off, I have a question for all the speakers. Would you say most of your job shifts came from applying to officially posted vacancies, or rather from networking and word-of-mouth opportunities? Which approach would you recommend to someone who is just starting out in the field or looking to make a transition?
Should we just speak up if we have an idea?
Absolutely, go for it.
Okay, hi, this is Todd Green over at Wiley, and I find that it is very much a combination, especially as I got further into my career. You needed to do a combination of networking to get to know people at different publishers and hear from people that you worked with before, perhaps, who know people who are looking, and also look for ads, because sometimes you can be in a conversation for networking and have someone say, you sound good for this new opportunity we're thinking about. But more often, there's something posted within the company, and you may not be talking to the hiring manager, but they may know the right person to connect you. So that's been very helpful for me.
Adding to that, I think it's also very important for the network in regards to the recommendations that you'll need in order to get your jobs. As you might imagine, as a colleague and as a teacher, I'm asked for recommendations, several times a year, and I am very happy to give those because it's really important that the names you have offering up recommendations are the kind of people who people receiving those will recognize.
Anybody else?
I agree. This is Marisa from Elsevier. I think it's definitely a combination. When I first got hired at Elsevier, I originally just had an informational interview, and then when the position officially became available, they reached out to me. So having that network was really helpful, but also I would say, be sure that you're keeping an eye out for opportunities, and don't be afraid to apply to opportunities, even if you are not 1,000% sure that you fit the qualifications or anything. I don't think that should limit you. If you think it's a good fit for you, then I would say it's always worth trying to send in an application and have that conversation, because it will only increase your network and also your experience in interviewing.
Great, thank you. So this is also for all the panelists. What's an example of a big challenge you faced in your career, and how did you move forward from that moment?
Well, I'll go after the elephant in the room, and that is that most professionals have been fired at least once. And that's okay, because oftentimes that's one of the situations of the door closed, but the window opened. So, don't be fearful when that happens. Don't think it's the end of the world, although it will certainly feel like that for at least a little while. But realize that that is part of the growing experience in any career. So use that as, one of those wonderful life learning experiences that they talk about. It's a tough one, but it's not one that should throw you. I'm sure you'll have some wonderful opportunities as the days go on. I did.
And this is Randy. Just really knowing when to reinvent yourself. So at AGU, we did a transition. I started off in production, and we partnered with Wiley. So a lot of the production, a lot of the colleagues that I had ended up losing their positions, and I found myself in a position where I had to reinvent myself to what the publications department would become. And I was able to do that luckily, and stay at AG. I really believed in the mission and thought it was a fantastic organization, and very interested in all the opportunities that were presented there. So just being prepared to reinvent yourself and staying adaptable to what circumstances may arise has really been worked in my favor.
And this is Laura Ricci, and one other example of a challenge that I think is common, sadly common, is there was a situation in my career where I was actually hired into a role that I was not a good fit for. Actually, the first role I got hired in at EBSCO, I think maybe on my 90-day review, I remember looking at my manager and saying, so this was a good try, but I don't think I'm the person for this role. And it was so hard to come to that decision, and to have honestly the bravery to say so, because you don't know what's going to happen after that conversation. But it was very much, the advice I would give if you're ever in that situation is to really be honest about it, because staying on longer than that, wasn't good for my career, wasn't good for my company. And it did lead to, because I was willing to have an open conversation and EBSCO was willing to have that conversation with me, I ended up getting a role that I loved, and I was in for 5 years working with a fantastic team. So I think, being careful when you do join a role, not to stay in it if it really just isn't right for you, and you know that, I think advocating for yourself in that situation is scary, but worth doing.
Great, thank you so much. Next question. So a lot of you had talked about being in the right place at the right time. What are the signs that you are in the right place at the right time in your career? And how do you know when to act in that opportunity?
Hi, this is Shirley Decker-Lucky. I think of it sort of as being you have a circle diagram where you've got 3 circles overlapping. And one would be something that you're really good at, that you love doing, that just brings you joy. Another one, well, I guess I conflated 2. One would be something you're really good at. Another is something that you really enjoy. And then I think the third is something that's valuable to the business. So, if someone said how their skills at being really organized out of production was also really helpful in their marketing role. And I think that, I think of those 3 circles a lot when I think of my own contentment. And then I think, too, for each person to understand their own ideal balance between doing things you know how to do and you're completely competent and can completely know that you're doing them excellently all the time. And then on the other hand, the desire to do brand new things you've never done before, where you might make mistakes and you might take risks. And I think that different people have different comfort levels with what their ideal is. Some people really like just knowing their job and owning it. And some people like doing things, brand new all the time. But being self-aware enough to know where you are on that continuum and, whether your current job fits that, being aware of that and just reflecting and appreciating that.
Thank you, Shirley. Anybody else on the panel want to chime in?
I'll jump in. This is Randy again. I think it's good to just have conversations about things you're passionate about. If there's something that you really pay attention to, or a issue that you're really interested in, whether it's open access, flipping a journal to open access, or whether it's a preprint server, maybe it's an idea that really just hasn't been discussed much, but you're really, really interested in knowing more about it. Having those discussions, I love to talk shop with people, because you never know what becomes revealed in those discussions. You may find a solution. You may reveal a new need that you didn't know was there, or you might put your finger on a problem that you haven't really been able to do quite yet. Like you knew something was off, but you just couldn't point to what that was. So I think really having conversations about things that you're passionate about, I think I do that quite often, but I think that that's one way to find those places where you could really have an impact.
This is Marisa. Just to piggyback off that a little bit, I think one way that helps me know I'm in a good place in my career is that I find it difficult not to do too many things at work. So there's a lot of opportunity here to get involved in different initiatives and trying new things, and just 90% of the time I'm interested in one of them. So I think that points to the fact that I find the business interesting, and I find a lot of opportunity here to explore new things and grow. And so I think if you find yourself excited about a lot of different things that are happening in the field or the company or wherever you're at, I think that's a good indicator that you're in the right place at the moment.
And if I could just also build on what Randy said, this is Todd, I was reminded of another piece of advice that I got for just uncovering those opportunities to get involved in things and to learn about new opportunities. We all run into some colleague as we're going up and down the hall or sitting at our desk, and they say, "Hey, how are you?" And you say, "Fine," or "What's new?" "Hey, it's all good." And someone once advised me, just be thinking about something you're working on and be able to say, oh, well, actually, I've just finished doing this. I just participated in an SSP seminar. I just finished a project, signed a new author, and it gives people something that might spark an idea or might make them think, oh, actually, we're working on something in my group that might be of interest. And it just kind of makes those networking juices flow a little more.
Thanks, all. Next question. Many speakers have talked about how the publishing industry is always changing. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen in this field during your career? And are there any shifts you anticipate in the future for this industry?
Well, I guess I could kick that off, considering I've probably seen the most changes we've had over the last 4.5 decades. Moving from hot metal to cold type, and we're sitting there with, having to deal with computer systems for the very first time in the history of publishing is definitely one of the things that shocked our systems. And things, as they say, continue to change. But I think the toughest part for us in publishing is attempting to anticipate the unanticipated. Let me tell you, what really blindsided us was the World Wide Web. We really didn't know what we were doing after that one. There will always be another new technology, whether or not we're, even hoping for a glimmer of a promise of an idea in what that might be. And so therefore, I think the greatest challenge with what we will be dealing with from now until infinity is the technology will never cease to stop evolving. What we want to do is make sure that that evolution is beneficial. That's going to be the tough part. And I think all of you are in a great position to take care of that.
This is Stephanie here. I have a comment maybe. I think from my perspective, which again is a little bit different, I see sort of the shifting away from, not that the research and the publications themselves aren't important, but there's a secondary layer around research analytics and the data sort of derived from the research that I think is having an increased importance. And it's this extra layer of information that, well, universities are sort of maybe poised to think about publishing in a different way. I think they're not really ready to think about how they could deal with this sort of research analytics layer that's on top of the research that I think is really going to be coming hard in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, we've seen already Elsevier sort of reposition themselves as, I believe, like a learning analytics company. So I think there'll be a lot of challenges and opportunities around that sort of extra data that we're getting out of the research publications.
This is Shirley. Sorry.
I was just going to quickly say that Stephanie brings up a very good point with regards to data, but we also have to remember that, especially when you listen to the acquisition editors, there's also a gut going on in terms of how information is best used.
And Shirley, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, thanks. So I was just going to chime in too. I think another big change that I've seen is, and all of us have seen, have been the change from delivery. So as things are delivered more digitally, some of the different ways that platforms that deliver that content can help chunk and tag the content so people can find it in new and different ways. And then connected to that, I think, is the financial change as we're looking to see journals and subscription models move to more open access. I think those are connected to the delivery, how we want to get more people access to more of the content that they may have paid for in their funding dollars. But it also, creates some challenges for people in the publishing industry to figure out how to deliver that and still pay their bills.
Thank you. And thank you to our panelists. I think this was a great session. I know I learned a lot today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica for closing.
Thank you for your participation in today's SSP webinar. Thank you to our speakers for their time and engaging presentations. And thanks again to our sponsor, Jack Farrell & Associates. You will receive a webinar evaluation via email. We encourage you to provide feedback and help us determine topics for future webinars. Don't miss our next webinar, Are There Really Real Use Cases for AI, on Wednesday, October 23rd at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Today's webinar was recorded and all registrants will be sent a link to the recording when it is posted on the SSP website. This concludes our session today.